What's up? Welcome to Journey in the Self. I'm your host, Sarah. Tonight's topic is called mind control. As I was contemplating the topic, I noticed a recurring theme from conversations that I've had over the past couple of weeks, um, culminating in a discussion I had over the weekend as I was engaged in doing some yoga practice. The reason that I chose the topic mind control is that control of the mind is a very key aspect of our experience here. It is a key tenet of spirituality and is one of the main objectives of spirituality. Is for us to gain and maintain control of our minds. As you all know, if you've listened to the show before, that I'm an avid Funketeer. Funketeer meaning that I'm a great fan of Parliament Funkadelic. And in the song Funkentelechy, George Clinton says the words, "Mind your wants, because someone wants your mind." So not only is it imperative that we just gain control of our minds for ourselves, because even without any kind of external influence or input, our mind is essentially out of control unless we rein it in. The mind is likened to a wild horse, a Mustang, untamed. It'll go wherever it will. It'll just go on a rampage. And if you hop on this untamed Mustang, it will take you wherever it's inclined to go and probably buck you off and take you somewhere, where you might find some peril. So that's what happens with our minds just on its own without any external influence. But we don't live in a world without external influence. There's much external influence. And there's a reason for that. So again, one of the main goals of the practice of spirituality, including and especially meditation, is for us to be able to tame and control our minds, because by so doing, we can tame and control our bodies. We can tame and control our emotions. We can dictate our future by what we focus on. Because as we've talked before, the power of the vibration of thought, particularly when it's focused thought, is an aspect of creation. Whether we are creating consciously or unconsciously, we are creating with our thoughts. And based upon the nature of our thoughts, we will engage in actions based upon the nature of the thoughts. Our emotions will be affected. The nature of our speech will be affected. And all of those things create their own vibrations. And in particular, the emotions create a vibration which amplifies the thought. Okay, and so all these things are basically put into a mixing bowl, if you will, and creating the power of creation, or mixed in a vial. It's like chemical. It causes like a chemical reaction that amplifies the creative force. Okay, and so if we're not aware of what we're thinking about, then we will end up unconsciously creating things that more than likely are not something that we want to manifest in our lives. Okay, again, that's just if there's no external influence, because our mind just operates on random. I want to read at this point a little piece that I came upon in one of the spiritual books that my spiritual master put out. And the little passage is called Thinking Problem. It says, "It started out innocently enough. I began to think at parties now and then, just to loosen up. Inevitably, though, one thought led to another, and soon I was more than just a social thinker. I began to think even when I was all by myself. Thinking became more and more important to me, and finally I was thinking all the time. I just couldn't control myself. I began thinking on the job. Soon, I had a reputation at work as a heavy thinker. One day the boss called me in and said, 'I like you, and it hurts me to say this, but your thinking has become a real problem. If you don't stop thinking on the job, we're going to have to let you go.' This gave me a lot to think about. At my next checkup, my doctor told me that my heavy thinking was giving me high blood pressure, and that if I went on like this, I might not live much longer. But today, I'm a recovering thinker. Life is so much more peaceful now that I stopped thinking." That's indeed a lot to think about. And when we reflect upon that last passage where he met with his doctor, and the doctor shared with him that if he goes on thinking the way he does, that he will continue to have high blood pressure, and perhaps die from a stroke or something that is a symptom of high blood pressure. So that shows us as well that our thoughts can not only affect us emotionally, but if we're holding on to that for a long time, it can also begin to affect us physiologically. And I know that one from experience. I may or may not share that. So, again, all of these are things that are happening without any external influence. But as I pointed out, we don't live in a world that's devoid of external influence. Even as I was on my way to my office here to do the show, I had the baseball game on, and we're in political season right now. And there was a political advertisement, Republican political advertisement, and clearly their tactic for controlling people's mind was to invoke fear. Okay, and so their pitch to have someone vote for their candidate of choice was to invoke fear of the other candidate based upon the premise that the Democrats or whoever, of which the other candidate was one, of course, are in favor of illegal immigration, and then they show or tell the story and show pictures of this illegal immigrant who raped someone, and said that, you know, all these immigrants include criminals and rapists and drug dealers and people who are child molesters. You know, please support us and our candidate to protect our children. Right? To get people riled up in fear, anger, or some type of negative emotion. Okay, so that's mind control, because they're controlling the nature of people's thoughts, getting people into a state of anxiety, fear, or anger, knowing that when people are brought into those type of negative emotional states, they become irrational and are subject to being manipulated and controlled more easily. Okay, and so we see that constantly on a continuous basis. In the television media, we're subjected to being controlled, either where the television in and of itself, because it draws people into it, it serves as a distraction from participating in life. It draws people into, you know, somewhat of a virtual world. Right? And so we saw during the pandemic, people were binge watching Netflix or whatever. And some people continue to do that type of thing because they've gotten into that habit. where it could have been an opportunity, since there wasn't as much programming going on, programming, that people could have taken the opportunity to go within, just to engage in more spiritual practice, all of which would have facilitated us gaining better control of our minds and better knowledge of ourselves. But instead, a lot of people have fallen for the bait and are gotten caught up in some type of streaming service to where they're compelled to binge watch some show or another. And people will get caught up in just not in just that activity, but whatever the nature of the show is going to dictate their mood, their vibration. Okay. Attitudes are manipulated through the television. People's perspective is manipulated. So, we see that the news even today does not give facts. It's very sparse on facts. The news is just a bunch of opinions. And they think so little of the general populace, and to a large extent, rightfully so, because so many of the populace do not think for themselves and not compelled to do so. And so people are very, very easily manipulated these days. People do not do research. People don't read. People just adopt the opinions that are being given to them by whatever news source that they choose. And then if one doesn't watch the news, then people are caught up in their social media, which is another type of a black hole, which also influences people's thoughts. On our last show, when I had Sister Jasiri on, we talked about, a bit about feminism and its effects on the black community. And we pointed out how black feminism in particular was a strategy from the intelligence community to undermine our community by driving a wedge between black men and black women. Okay, and so those of us who have been in the war, I would refuse to use the term struggle, but I would instead use the term the war. Those of us who have been battling in that war are full aware of the fact that there's an ongoing attack strategy against our community. As we know, COINTELPRO was initiated to undermine the black liberation and civil rights movements, and I use them distinctly different because they had different objectives. But both of them were seen as threats by the controllers, if you will. And so they initiated a counterintelligence program to undermine our movements. On the surface, COINTELPRO had been disbanded, but it is just continues to operate under a different name. Okay, so it would be naive to think that those strategies have discontinued. Those strategies do continue, and the media is the propaganda arm of white supremacy. And so those attacks continue. The psychological manipulation continues. Indeed, we just saw that, over the past 2 years throughout the pandemic, without going into a lot of detail about that. But we know that a lot of that was driven by manipulating people through fear. To compel many people to do things that they really didn't want to do. Some people just went willingly because, as I talked about, some people don't even engage in any type of free thinking and think for themselves. And so they're basically told what to do and just obey. But some people had given it some thought and had some reservations, but were compelled to acquiesce out of fear. Okay. And so going back to spirituality, one of the definitions of spirituality is that spirituality is about awareness. Indeed, yoga is referred to at times as a science of awareness. The objective is to expand our awareness of ourselves, awareness of the fact that we are thinking, and then awareness of the fact that we can transcend the nature of our thoughts, and we can disassociate from our thoughts. We can disassociate from our identification with our body and our minds, realizing that our body and our minds are simply vehicles and a navigation system that we use to operate here in this physical realm. It's not who we are. And so the practice of spirituality is to learn, is a process of transcending that identification. But a lot of it is tied into the extent to which we can control our minds. Even the practice of the different asanas in yoga positions is meant to condition the body to where we can be able to sit comfortably in meditation. And to be able to learn also how to control our breath, which also helps us to control our thoughts. And it is the rate of our thoughts that creates the barrier between our perception of true reality. our perception of the universe, our perception of ourselves as being spirit, as opposed to identifying with the limited nature of our body and our mind. And so when we can still the mind, we expand our awareness of the universe. We expand our knowledge of self. That's why, again, I refer to the show as Journey into Self, because it's my objective to provoke a deeper level of thought, to provoke people to develop a higher level of awareness, to be aware of what it is that we're thinking, the things that we're choosing, the things that we're constantly choosing, and to contemplate whether the choices that we are making are conscious choices, are things that we have consciously chosen to do, or if those things have been chosen for us by external forces, or if they're just a random program that's been running in our subconscious, which is the case for most of us. Okay, so part of the journey into self is to be able to identify what that program is that's been running in our subconscious, and to deprogram. Right? So in that same song that I mentioned at the outset, the song Funkadelic by Parliament, George Clinton says, mind your wants, because someone wants your mind, program, deprogram, reprogram. Okay, so we have been programmed. And the things that we do unconsciously are as a result of the program that's been running for the majority of our lives. And so we just do things unconsciously without any awareness as to why. But when we begin to develop awareness, we begin the process of being engaged in contemplation, to observe ourselves as we go through the course of life, to be able to detach and call into question the motivation for why we're doing things, and to be able to catch ourselves if we're engaged in something that does not serve us and is not consistent with the goals that we have set for ourselves. And to also be aware if the reason that we've chosen a certain action is based upon some type of external influence. Are we going to the fast food restaurant because of some commercial that just came on? Are we voting for this candidate or that candidate due to, or a proposition out of fear? Are we being manipulated? Are we being controlled? Okay. That is always the agenda, particularly for those of us who are uh, Black, or whatever designation that you want to choose, Moors, uh, of African descent. Uh, I do not use the term, uh, what is it, African descendants of slaves or whatever. Because not all of us are descendants of slaves. And uh, there's power to the words that we use. Okay, and so that's a very limiting definition. So I do not use that, but you know what I mean. Okay, and so like this. We're about to, I think in about a week or two, the second Black Panther quote unquote movie is coming out. And this is on the wake of the movie The Woman King. Okay. And I have not watched either. I have no intention of doing so. Because I know that as part of the manipulation, the mind control of emasculating Black men, and by putting Black women in a superior position in terms of both intellect, mental strength, emotional strength, and physical strength. And so the psychological effect of that is to give Black women a perspective of superiority over Black men, which will further the divide between Black men and women, making it even more difficult for Black women and Black men to be able to have a relationship, to be able to communicate, to be able to be partners, equals. Because if one party in that equation is looking down at the other one, that is not a conducive situation for a relationship to be fostered. And so be mindful of that. That is an example of mind control. And it's very subtle. But best believe it will and is having an impact on the relationships in our community between Black men and Black women. Just as the movie The Color Purple did so, casting Black men in a negative light, to casting Black men as abusers of Black women, casting Black women as victims, when that was not the reality in our community. And as my brother, Dr. T. Hassan Johnson, has so vividly pointed out in his work, that abuse, whether it's physical, emotional, or sexual within our community, does go two ways. He's identified countless instances where black men were physically and emotionally abused and sexually abused. Okay, but that's not the narrative. Okay, and so the narrative that black men are sexual predators, violent against their women, misogynistic, those are examples of mind control in and of themselves. Social media. My brother Steve Coakley was very suspicious of social media and the internet, understanding that the internet was created by the intelligence community. And social media is very well mined as a source of information on people, but not only is it a very ripe source of information for the intelligence community, it is also a very fruitful means of counterintelligence. Counterintelligence means basically manipulating the enemy or target to engage in basically self-destruction. And so much of the conflict that's going on within our community, particularly that between black men and black women, is fomented on social media. And you can best believe that there is some counterintelligence going on in that regard. That is also mind control. Brother Jamal, you have any comments you'd like to share? Give it a minute for brother Jamal to get to the mic. But yeah, but it's imperative that we have awareness of these things, because if we're not aware, we can be very easily manipulated into self-destructive activity individually. So we can get caught up in things, caught in a black hole, in things on the internet, things on social media, television, doing things that are not productive, that are preoccupying us from being able to fulfill our dharma or our purpose in life, because we all have a purpose beyond the shared purpose that we all have of coming into the realization of God. We all have that shared purpose, but we all have a purpose to contribute to the upliftment of humanity. We all have something to contribute to that. And so, but many of us are not doing so because we're distracted by uh, all the different things that are available to serve as a distraction. Well, Jamal.
All right. Greetings, Hotep. Hopefully you can hear me.
I can hear you, brother.
Okay. Fantastic. Just trying to get a mic hooked up here. You know, years ago, I did a presentation in New York. I used to do an annual presentation on media images. And Attorney Alton Maddox was the host of the program. It was at what was called the Slave Theater in Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that he said in regards to media images, and this is part of his introduction before I spoke, was that we do have to pay very close attention to this process of how information and images are displayed really in our life, and particular as black people. So the term that you were emphasizing, the word you were emphasizing repetitively, program, as in programming, is something very critical to understand that that is the process that most of us are engaging with when we interact with media on different fronts. There is programming on different levels. There is programming to, I would say, incarcerate the mind and keep it encased, if you will, in a thought process that's very limited. There is racist, overtly racist programming. I believe that is used to pit people against each other. And again, that's another means of control. If you believe that you are superior and then believe that someone else is inferior, and then on the flip side, if you can deduce from the programming that you are inferior and someone else is superior, both parties are actually very easy to control at that point. Even the previous president of the United States, Donald Trump, of all people, had concluded that when he had said, you know what, I think I'll run as a Republican because it'll be easy to control those folks, because I could just got to give them a very simple message of what they want to hear. One of the things that Attorney Maddox said, which always I think rings true to this day, is that most people, in particular most black people in the Western world, if not the world, because Western programming is all over the world, need not to engage with the television and most cinematic films unless you are trained on how to dissect and analyze them. If you're sitting there as an empty vessel, almost allowing yourself to openly and freely allow the images and the messaging to engulf you, then you are a prime target, if you will, for control. Analyzation and the process of being objective when you're looking at these images allows the programming process to be diminished. And in some cases, it can be rendered ineffective if you really know what you're doing and you know what you're looking for. But if you don't, then there's a great probability that you will be consumed by these images. And consumed means that you will attach your emotional body to what is happening, what is being shown to you, what is being told to you, to the point where you might not even know what your thoughts are.
Mm-hmm.
Because your thoughts now have been implanted in you by an outside entity. And if that happens over a long period of time, I believe it can even begin to affect your spirit. I think that your spiritual being can, when questioned, can be altered. And if you can't hear your authentic voice at some point, then you can't hear and understand and or feel the spirit, the divine spirit. It's being your intellect and your mind and your ability to perceive the outside world is being so programmed that you lose sight of who you are. And if you don't know who you are, then it's a great probability that you won't be able to hear the divine. And so you can be working, quote unquote, against your best interests all the time. So I agree with Attorney Maddox. If not trained properly, stay away from the Western programming. It is and will be used to control you against your self-interest. I'll just throw that out there, and maybe someone will respond. We'll see.
Well, I fully concur with what you and Attorney Maddox said, and it's important to note, and it's almost even obvious. Television shows and the season of shows that they have lined up are called, respectively, TV programs and television programming. That's not by chance. They are just that. They're programs, and they're programming us. Okay. It's important to note as well that the mind is a video recorder. It records everything that we see, everything that we take in. It records all of our experiences and plays them back to us. And those that remind us of things in the past can serve as triggers to compel a reaction. And those reactions are unconscious. And so, as Brother Jamal said, we can easily find ourselves doing things not knowing why we're doing them. And if we're not careful, we can be so distracted that we completely lose sight of our connection with spirit. Because it is the fact that, as I pointed out earlier, the more active and distracted our mind is, the less connection with spirit, because it's all the activity of the mind is what serves as the veil that separates us from being in communion with spirit, with being able to even perceive spirit. And so the more we get distracted, affected by programming, the further we move away from spirit. And that is why it operates the way it does. Because the closer that we get to our connection with spirit, the less we're able to be controlled. And so the primary objective of the media and all these things, social media, television media, radio, all these things are designed to distract us, to prevent us from being able to connect with spirit, to distract us from aspiring to connect with spirit. And if we are even on the path of doing so, to derail us from our path. And so it's extremely important that we maintain a high level of vigilance to not allow ourselves to fall prey and get caught up in that distraction. And so I agree, because we are being continuously programmed. If we're not have the training and the awareness to be able to identify those symbols that are invoked to manipulate us, those triggers, then we will very easily and unconsciously fall prey to the manipulation and programming. But that is exactly what it's designed to do, is to distract us from our path to connecting with spirit.
I think one of the terms that has been coined years ago is noise clutter. And that noise clutter becomes so loud in our minds, in our head, in our being, that we can't tell what is our thought, or should I say, we can't distinguish our own thoughts from the thoughts that are being implanted.
Yes.
And they are bombarding us for the most part. I mean, I think now more so than ever before. I mean, the processing, or should I say the programming, well, the processing too, was at a slower pace years ago. But obviously with the advent of television, the advent of radio, things started to speed up in terms of programming. And then, even through music on some level.
Oh, music at a major level. Because not only is it the lyrics that influence people, but it's also the vibration of the sound.
Right, the tone.
And so a lot of the sound that's going on right now is a lot of like lower frequencies, a lot of heavy bass, which works on the lower chakras, which are which is where the sex organs are, right? And so it keeps people resonating at a lower level of consciousness.
These are things that most of us tend not to know anything about, and or even if we've maybe heard it in passing, just don't take it serious. But that's how it works. That's how it works most effectively, is when you're not paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
And so the messaging and or the programming becomes more embedded deeper when you have no filters up, when you have no awareness of what's taking place. And again, I can't stress it enough. All of our thoughts are not our own.
No, they're absolutely not.
They're not our own thoughts. And so that means that our behavior is alien to us as well. So we are acting out on things, on energy, on frequencies, on messaging that is coming from the outside. It's being manipulated. It's almost as if you're taking a laser beam of data and information and pointing it at somebody, pointing it at their pineal gland, turning it on, shooting messages in there nonstop, and then you start to act out based on the messaging that's coming into you from the outside versus that which is being cultivated from you from the inside. We see it all the time. This is probably another reason why in our community in particular, our relationships are so strained, because we are not really talking to each other. We're talking at each other. We're talking at each other's persona, and all these personas are not even us. They're not even real. But we've taken on this persona based on the data and the information that's being fed to us. And so our persona is talking to someone else's persona and trying to filter through that and get down to the real core of who we are. For some of us, that's virtually impossible. So we start acting out, again, based on the data and information and the programming that's being fed to us versus what we can cultivate and develop from the inside out. We don't, you can't do it if you can't hear yourself, if you can't hear your own thoughts. So I think that would be a question I would ask, yourself, Brother Sarah, as a counselor, and anyone that may even have an answer to this, is how do we get to a point, and what are the steps and techniques we can take to hear our authentic voice?
Well, it goes back to that piece that I read at the outset. Okay, the authentic voice is being drowned out by the fact that we're thinking too much. Whether it's the thoughts that are just constantly going through our mind that are in our consciousness, and those that are being put into our consciousness from external sources. So it's both of those things that are keeping us from being able to hear the authentic or the inner voice. Okay, because our minds are so cluttered with those thoughts. Okay, and so that's why it is so important, and that's why I continuously emphasize whenever I have the opportunity to. It's so important for us to engage in meditation, because it's during meditation that we learn the ability to be able to detach from thought, to withdraw our energy from thought. And as we develop the ability to detach from thought, we expand our awareness that we are thinking. We expand our awareness of the nature of the thoughts. We notice when thoughts come into our consciousness, whether they're coming in just from the ether, if you will, or if it's been coming in from some type of media source, or, the collective consciousness. Okay, the more that we practice meditation, the more we learn the ability to detach and withdraw our energy from thoughts, the more awareness that we have of ourselves, the more control that we have of ourselves. And when we're able to quiet our minds, then we can hear the guidance of the inner voice, which is the voice of our true, authentic self. I've often told people that, when I get, if I ever get into any kind of frustration, energy over trying to figure out something that I'm dealing with, it's when I quiet my mind and stop thinking that the answer comes. And so it's not for us to try to figure everything out. Often the mind is the problem. We're thinking too much. And so it's when we learn to be able to stop ourselves from thinking that we can be in tune with the guidance from within, the authentic, our true voice, our inner voice, our higher conscious, that then we can be able to put ourselves in a position to be able to be guided by that, rather than being manipulated by external thoughts or being controlled by the mind. It is for us to be in control of the mind rather than the mind being in control of us, which is the case for most people. Most people have absolutely no control of their minds. Their minds have control of them. And so you don't know what to expect.
Is it that they have no control over their minds because they, I guess, if you will, lack emotional stability in some regards, or emotional maturity? So you lose control over your mind.
It can be a number of things. It's, you'll notice there's some people who talk really fast, right? And if you notice, when people talk fast, often they have a difficult time being able to stay on topic, right? Well, that's someone who does not have any control over their mind. Their mind is controlling them, right? And so people like that have a difficult time being able to concentrate. So their mind is just continually just operating, and they don't know how to slow it down. People like that have a very difficult time being able to sleep. All the people who come to me, and I've had a lot of people come to me recently, expressing that they cannot sleep. And I know the reason as soon as they say it. They're thinking too much, right? The other thing that can happen is, most people's consciousness is either rooted in the past or thinking about something that might happen in the future. And so people are not in the present moment. They're not experiencing the present moment. They're not making decisions upon what's happening in the present moment. They're not even here. Okay, so when you're talking to most people, they're not even here with you, really. Okay, they're resonating on something that's happened to them in the past. They're reacting to what you're saying to them based upon what's happening in the past. They're interpreting what you're saying based upon what's happened in the past. Or they're worried about something that you're saying because they've projected about something that might happen in the future. Like, I used to get into arguments with my ex-wife about things that she imagined might happen in the future. It didn't even happen. But her mind was completely out of control. And so in her mind, she's like reacting to things that she's projected as if they were reality. They've become reality for her. And so it's just a lack of self-awareness. Most people don't have a lot of self-awareness. And most people don't even try to get it. And that's why there's a lot of conflict in the world, because instead of trying to gain any kind of self-awareness, they just will default to just blaming. Blaming other people, blaming the circumstances, blaming something, because it's out, but they will not look at themselves as a source. And that's why relationships are so hard. But, all of it is really designed to compel us to, the answer is within. And ultimately, when people start realizing that all the external stuff is not the answer, nothing that you can find outside of yourself is going to bring you happiness. The answer is not there. Nothing in the external world is going to bring any kind of peace. It just distracts you from peace. The only thing that we're going to be able to do to be able to find peace is when we go within.
I would agree, brother. And that's why it's so critical to alleviate that noise clutter. It's so important to be able to reach a point where you can hear your authentic voice.
Brother, and that's the reason I do this show is to help bring about some type of consciousness to compel people to begin the process of doing that. And and that's part of the work that I do as a spiritual teacher and counselor, is to help people to be able to expand their awareness, to learn how to meditate, to develop the ability to be in observation of oneself, because once you're able to observe and be fully present, then we can exercise control over our minds, our emotional state, and be able to dictate what we create for ourselves in the future.
Check.
So, as I always say, I can help you if that's something that you want to do, or you can just continue to just be caught up in the matrix. But if you want to be unplugged, you can reach out to me, and I can help you to unplug yourself. I can't unplug you. I can help you unplug yourself. If I can be of service to you, or if you want me to be of service to you, then do reach out. You can go and set up an appointment with me on my website, www.sa-ra.org. That's www.sa-ra.org. Or you can reach out to me on Facebook, but the website's the best way. All right. I think that's all I have for tonight. Brother Jamal, you have any other comments?
Free your mind.
That's right.
And the rest will follow.
Yeah, that's another George Clinton lyric. All right, with that, thank you for joining the self, and we'll see you next time on Tap.